What happens when one of Britain's most beloved actors comes face to face with a host who refuses to show basic respect? You won't believe what unfolds when Michael Caine sits down for what should have been a simple chat about his latest project, only to find himself under attack from the very first question. Before we get into this incredible story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below because you're not going to believe what unfolds. Last night's episode of Lorraine started like any other morning show segment. But within minutes, the atmosphere turned ice cold as Lorraine Kelly launched into what can only be described as an ambush interview that left viewers stunned and one of cinema's greatest legends walking off set in disgust. The tension was palpable from the moment Michael Caine settled into the bright orange sofa. Kelly, with that signature forced smile plastered across her face, wasted no time in going for the jugular. "So, Michael," she began with barely concealed disdain, "at your age, don't you think it's time to gracefully step aside and let younger actors have their moment?" Caine, visibly taken aback by the brazen disrespect, straightened in his seat. "I beg your pardon, Lorraine. I'm here to discuss my new film, not to be lectured about retirement by someone who's made a career out of reading autocue." The studio fell silent. Even the camera operators seemed stunned by Kelly's opening salvo, but she wasn't finished. Leaning forward with that predatory gleam in her eyes, she pressed on relentlessly. "Well, let's be honest, Michael. Your recent performances have been, shall we say, forgettable. Are you just clinging onto roles for the paycheck at this point?" What happened next was electric. Caine's legendary composure began to crack as he processed the sheer audacity of the attack. "Forgettable?" he repeated slowly, his voice carrying that unmistakable edge that had made him famous in films like Get Carter. "I've been making films longer than you've been alive, and you're sitting there questioning my motivation?" But Kelly, seemingly oblivious to the gathering storm, doubled down with ruthless precision. "I'm just saying what everyone's thinking, Michael. Hollywood has moved on. Your time was the 70s and 80s. Isn't this all just a bit sad?" The word sad hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Caine's face darkened, and for a moment, viewers could see the flash of steel that had made him one of cinema's most compelling screen presences. "Sad?" he said, his voice now dangerously quiet. "What's sad, Lorraine, is watching someone with no discernible talent beyond reading other people's words try to tear down someone who's actually achieved something meaningful." Rather than backing down, Kelly escalated further, her voice taking on that patronizing tone she reserves for guests she clearly despises. "Oh, come now, Michael. No need to get defensive. I'm simply asking the questions that need to be asked. Surely, at 89, you must realize that your relevance has, well, expired?" The studio audience began to shift uncomfortably in their seats. This wasn't the gentle morning chat they'd expected. This was character assassination playing out live on television. Caine's jaw tightened as he absorbed the full impact of Kelly's words. "Expired?" he repeated, his voice now carrying decades of barely contained frustration. "Like you think I'm some sort of milk carton past its sell-by date?" Kelly's response was swift and merciless. "Well, if the shoe fits, Michael. I mean, when was the last time you delivered a truly memorable performance? Can you even remember your lines anymore? Or do they have to feed them to you through an earpiece?" That was the moment everything changed. The air in the studio became electric with tension as Caine slowly rose from his chair, his famous blue eyes blazing with an intensity that reminded everyone watching exactly why he'd been such a formidable screen presence for over 5 decades. "Right," he said, his voice cutting through the studio like a blade. "That's quite enough." But Kelly wasn't finished twisting the knife. With that sickly sweet smile still plastered across her face, she delivered what she clearly thought would be the killing blow. "Oh, are we having a little tantrum now, Michael? Perhaps this is exactly what I mean about aging gracefully. You can't handle a few honest questions from someone half your age?" The condescension in her voice was unmistakable, and it had the effect of lighting a fuse that had been building throughout the entire exchange. Caine turned to face her fully, and when he spoke, his voice carried the full weight of his legendary career. "Half my age?" he said, his tone now arctic. "And what exactly have you accomplished in that time, Lorraine? What's your legacy?" Asking impertinent questions to people who've actually done something with their lives. Kelly's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing the venom beneath. My legacy is holding people accountable, Michael. Something your generation never had to deal with. You all lived in this bubble, where no one dared question the great movie stars. The words were calculated to wound, and they hit their mark. Caine's composure, which had been hanging by a thread, finally snapped. Accountable? He said, his voice rising for the first time. You think what you're doing here is holding people accountable? This isn't journalism, Lorraine. This is just spite dressed up as entertainment. What followed was perhaps the most uncomfortable moment in morning television history. Kelly, sensing she was losing control of the situation, made one final desperate attempt to regain the upper hand. Well, Michael, if you can't handle the heat of a simple interview, perhaps that proves my point about you being past your prime. Maybe it's time to accept that your glory days are behind you. The silence that followed was deafening. Caine stood there for a long moment, looking down at Kelly with an expression that managed to convey both disappointment and disgust in equal measure. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried more power than any shout could have managed. You know what, Lorraine? He said, slowly removing his microphone and placing it carefully on the coffee table. I've met some truly unpleasant people in this business. Producers who'd sell their own mothers for a percentage point. Directors who treated their crews like dirt. Agents who'd lie to your face while picking your pocket. But I've never met anyone quite as nasty as you. Kelly's face went pale as she realized the interview was slipping away from her completely. Now, Michael, there's no need to— Oh, but there is, Caine interrupted, his voice steady and controlled once more. Because what you've done here today isn't entertainment. It isn't even good television. It's just cruelty for the sake of cruelty. And I won't be part of it. With that, the legendary actor straightened his jacket, looked directly into the main camera, and delivered his parting shot. To anyone watching this who might be thinking about coming on this show, don't. Life's too short to waste it on people who mistake meanness for cleverness. Then, without another word, Michael Caine walked off the set, leaving Lorraine Kelly sitting alone on her orange sofa, her fake smile finally cracking as she realized she'd just committed television suicide live on air. The cameras kept rolling as she stammered something about going to a commercial break, but the damage was done. In less than 10 minutes, one of Britain's most respected actors had been pushed beyond his breaking point by a host whose idea of entertainment was publicly humiliating her guests. The confrontation ended not with a graceful resolution, but with the sight of a cinema legend walking away from what he clearly saw as beneath his dignity, leaving behind a host who had revealed herself to be everything wrong with modern television.